Talked about the history of personal computers slash microcomputers, software. How about the history of email systems? What are you doing in that area?
So yeah, we've had a couple of interesting projects in that area. A little story there is, I guess now it's 5 or 6 years ago, an intern from the library school at San Jose State visited me and said, I'd like to work on something with you. He knew that I was working on different areas of software archiving and things like that. And I had just been contacted by a group at the medical school at Stanford that were wrestling with the fact that they were decommissioning the last of the tape drives that they had there. And they had come across some material relating to their email systems in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So this poor intern that came in, Peter Chan, I said, hey, what I would like is I would like you to work with these people to extract the email from this, tape system and deliver it to me in a format that is forensically sound. You haven't changed the date stamps and the time stamps and things like that. You haven't intruded in the data at all. And also that basically allows me to search through the stuff. And one of the reasons for that was I was at the time working on a project having to do with the history of computer games. And in our group, we were working with a historian who was working on the game Adventure. And at that time, it was thought that the source code for this game from the 1970s, which was very, very important, not just for history of games, but also for some interesting aspects of programming, it was thought that the source code was lost. But I knew that the guy at Stanford who had done a version of this game was part of the generation that this email system documented. So I basically wanted to do a search to see if I could find this Adventure source code in here, and I figured that would be my heuristic for determining if this guy did a good job. I could then search through this. Sure enough, he delivered this email system, and we discovered from that, from being able to preserve this email system from the medical school computer, we discovered the long missing source code for this game Adventure, the database and everything. We discovered a lot of things about the community that was working on it. This was complete serendipity because it just had to do with the fact that at that time at Stanford, the various email systems and computers, medical school, administrative computing, some of the departments were sort of intermixed. That was a little after Ed Feigenbaum had been running things. And so this archival preservation project about email, which was pretty early in that game, 5 or 6 years ago, there wasn't much going on with email, yielded this really important information about a really completely unrelated moment in the history of software. Peter Chan, the guy who I just mentioned, has gone on, and he's now developed a thing called ePad, which is a software that is based on the dissertation of somebody from the Stanford Computer Science Department that provides a number of different ways for first of all, handling email in a forensically sound way, as I mentioned, but then also providing ways of interrogating email. What we're finding generally, by the way, you've asked about email, but also in asking that question, you moved us subtly from talking about paper archives to talking about born digital materials.
That
right?
was my next question.
Yeah.
That's the intent. I follow a logical progression sequence.
So what happens there is, say with something like email as opposed to paper correspondence, you begin to have questions that are very difficult to handle in a conventionally human readable way. It's very difficult to go through an entire collection of email like you would through someone's papers that have been cataloged and so on. So this work, ePad, is a way of representing in various ways email by giving you the opportunity to determine groups of people that may have corresponded, topical modeling that's done by the software, timelines of email and so on, then in turn exposes the metadata of the email, which is basically the header information and certain topics that have been pulled out from the body of email, like a company names, people names, and so on, that's exposed to you online without showing you the entire body of the email, that which might involve personal information. So you don't want to necessarily, as I said earlier, put that out openly on the web. But through this program that he's devised, you are able to see what people might have been mentioned in an email, what companies might have been mentioned, which group of correspondence that a particular individual had is represented over a period of time in a body of email and all of that. So we're kind of, we just, a couple people from our library just went to Library of Congress to give a presentation about this software we're developing for dealing with email. And we're moving along pretty well with that. Another point I could make, just as, which is this is kind of introduced, is that library work today, especially with digital collections, involves technology development almost as much as it does traditional librarianship. So when we,
I would imagine that.
yeah, when we pick up an email collection, what do we do with it? There aren't really tools available out there that anyone developed for historical use of email collections. So libraries that end up collecting that kind of material are developing those tools as we go along. And it's actually a very exciting part of the work that we're doing with digital collections right now.
Thanks, Henry.